Welcome back to the Life of Tash. I'm Tash. Today I'm doing a bit of an update in the life of Tash. I'm in my new workspace. We moved studios a couple of weeks ago in the new year when we're actually filming this. And as you might have seen on my Instagram, I also launched my first physical products, which are the cuffs as I'm wearing, which you might have seen last year in some episodes. I've started studying again. I'm doing a Vita coaching certification in love, sex, and relationships under Layla Martin. And this year I'm turning the big 4-0. And I guess I've been really thinking about what that means for me and really entering the next chapter of my life. So 2025, the start of the year wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. There was a few struggles, and I've been talking to a lot of people. I think everyone thought that 2025 is just going to be the year, which I still think it's going to be. But I think there's been a lot of clearing going on for everyone. And I think these first few months of 2025, we're really clearing a lot of things. And as I said, I really feel like I'm stepping into the next phase of my life. And I think one of the things that I was recently thinking about, and it's interesting coming from it as a dominatrix, is this theory of no more nice girl. And you might just assume that all dominatrixes are just not nice girls. But we still have the same social conditioning that everyone is subjected to, and especially women. We have been brought up to always be nice and polite and people pleasing. I think that's really a term that's being used at the moment is people pleasing. And what many people don't realize is that people pleasing is a form of emotional suppression. And what happens when we store our emotions up inside of us, it sometimes turns into trauma that we're just storing in the body. And we need to realize it's not just about making other people happy. It's also about being afraid of being unliked. So I kind of see it as like there's two sides of it. There's the one side that I think we're just always trying to tend to maybe other people's needs, especially if we're in positions of being partners or mothers or carers of other people. It's very easy to go into that mode of always thinking about others before yourself. But I think the other part of it is also being okay with just being unliked. Now, I must admit, I've been quite fortunate in my life to honestly really not care much what people think of me. I mean, to live my type of lifestyle and to live it so openly as I do, you kind of have to have that approach, and I always have. However, recently something that I did realize is I was kind of always cool for people not to like me for the version of me that I have of myself, if that makes sense. Like, if they kind of saw me as how I believe I've presented myself in an honest, true light, and they were like, that's not for me, I had no problem with that. Like, cool, I'm not for everyone. And that's not something that ever bothered me. But what I was finding it really hard to accept, if I believed that that person wasn't seeing me in the true light that I see myself, or maybe they had misunderstood me or misunderstood my intentions, I was having a real problem with that. And I realized that it's not just about accepting people not liking you as the you think you're presenting, but also like some people will never like you for no good reason. And there's nothing that you can ever do that's going to change their mind. So it's a waste of energy. And it's also saying to yourself that you need external validation, which you don't. The validation needs to come from yourself, and it needs to come from within. So don't go changing the way you act or you go about your life due to the opinions or the reactions or the expectations of others. You're allowed to make mistakes. I think this was another one that really hit me. Like, no one's perfect. And I think we can all agree that no one's perfect. And no matter how much work we do on ourselves, we're going to be making mistakes because that's the way we learn and that's the way we grow. And to be honest, I would go as far as saying that if you're not making mistakes, then that's probably a hint that you've probably stopped growing. Stop apologizing for stuff you don't need to apologize for just because you told the truth and someone else didn't like it. I do direct this a lot of the time as women. I know that men suffer the same things that I've just discussed, but it's interesting. I think it's about 70 to 80% of autoimmune diseases are being diagnosed to women. And a lot of autoimmune diseases don't have a medical origin as to give an explanation of why someone got it. But, we are becoming more aware of that. We do give ourselves illnesses or autoimmune conditions from prolonged exposure to stress or, particularly stress that has turned into trauma that is stored in the body. So I guess the next question is, well, what can we do, Tash? Like, you're bringing all this up, but like, what the fuck? And I think it's really about expressing our emotions and being okay to express emotions that we might not think are the good emotions, and stop labeling emotions as good and bad. And, I tell my 8-year-old daughter, it's okay to be angry. Anger is a valid emotion. It's good to be angry. And you will get a lot of stored up anger in your body if you never express it. It's good to scream into a pillow and get that anger out, complete that stress cycle. So I think that's the first thing we should do is really acknowledge the emotions when we're feeling them. Feel that anger, feel that disappointment, feel that sadness, feel whatever emotion is coming through you, because then you can complete the cycle and then you can let it pass. You could think about moving more. Exercise is a great way to complete that cycle. Shaking your body, dance, like just hold something really, really tight, even your fist. That's a great way to complete that stress cycle. Vocalizing it, as I said, scream into a pillow, scream into a forest. I know, scream in your house. Who cares who hears you? Do some breath work, mindfulness, be present with those emotions. As I said, recognize and validate them. Look at where your body's holding on to tension. Where's the energy in your body? How can you maybe move that energy out? How can you release it? So I think that was just something that's really hit me, the start of 2025, as something of accepting that we don't always have to be nice all the time. We don't have to get everyone's acceptance or approval all the time. What is the best way, as I have always promoted, is to be authentically you, and that includes making mistakes. So just authentically be you. Don't worry about being the perfect person, always having the perfect emotions. Take it out, release, and just accept. So the part 2 of this solo I wanted to go into was about conscious kink. And I think a lot of people kind of think, what is conscious kink? Because for me, to be honest, conscious kink really is kink. But I guess, we like, why is there even conscious kink, you might say? And I thought about this, and maybe it's due to porn that people are exposed to these days. Maybe it's the misrepresentation we've had in mainstream media and movies, poor sexual education, including kinks and fetishes, bad experiences that we've all had, ill-informed consent culture. And there's probably many other reasons that really saw that BDSM was being misunderstood, and so was kink. And I think that the rise of conscious kink is something that people were really relating to and drawn to kind of move away from these stereotypes that we were being exposed to so often and still are. So conscious kink is a holistic approach to engaging in BDSM and kink. The focus is really on awareness and intention. And intention is something that I, as a practitioner, is so important for me. Hence why I identify as a conscious kink practitioner. It's understanding that BDSM is not just a physical process or involves physical sensations only, but we move through significant emotional and psychological dimensions when we practice. So Intention. What do I mean when I say, what's your intention to play? And I guess, no intention is better than the other. And we don't always have to be having deep, meaningful intentions to our play sessions. Sometimes they are. Sometimes we're doing, inner child work. Sometimes we're doing shadow work. And this is, very important work when we're doing them. But sometimes the intention is literally to have fun and play. And I think that's important to recognize as well, that it's completely okay to come into a session, to a play scene or a session or whatever you're engaging in with someone else or even yourself, and say, I've had a really stressful day today and I just want to let loose and play. Any intention is perfectly fine. And as I said, no intention is better than another. It's more about being true to yourself and what you need in that moment to be authentic to yourself, and also be authentic to the person or persons that you're showing up there with. To be honest about what state you're in and what you're going to be able to offer in that space for the day. Another aspect of conscious kink is really informed and enthusiastic consent. And again, I think, to be honest, this should just be in kink and in BDSM, and it is. But in conscious kink, it's even more important. It's even more paramount that we really get people aware of what they're engaging in, the activities they're engaging in, the realms of emotions and psychological play areas that they're engaging in, and that it's a hell yes. I always talk about enthusiastic consent as if you're saying it's a hell yes, because just getting someone to be like, okay, to me is not enthusiastic consent. And consent's not a one-time agreement. This is the other thing. Consent is an ongoing process. It can be revoked at any time, and I mean any time. So even if you've agreed to something at the beginning of a scene before it's started in your negotiation, your pre-scene negotiation, you can withdraw it 5 minutes later when you've started that scene. There's nothing wrong with that. That is what consent is. It can be revoked at any time, no questions asked. And this is what builds trust and respect. It's where everyone feels empowered to use their voice and to express their needs. Another aspect in conscious kink is mindfulness. I know we use the term mindfulness a lot these days, but mindfulness really encourages participants to be attuned to their own feelings and those of their partners. This involves maintaining awareness of the physical sensations in your body, your emotional states that might come in and out during a scene, the shifts in your psychological comfort levels during a scene. It's about respecting what your body and mind are telling you. Maybe you'll be noticing areas of resistance. And when you do, don't ignore them. Be mindful. Think about, why am I resisting this? Where is it located in my body? Can you attend to them during the scene? Do you need to take a break and attend to them? Do you need to make sure you just attend to them after the scene and have a chat about it? Be gentle with yourself. Know when you can push yourself. We talk about playing with our edges and testing our edges, and that is a really important part of kink and BDSM, is being able to test our edges. And really, sometimes that's where we can feel very alive. But also know when you need to put the brakes on. Know when you need to go a bit slower. Know when you need to be a bit gentler with yourself, because that's just as important as pushing it. Using mindfulness, you can better navigate all these experiences, and you will be responding more appropriate to, what's coming up for you. What are you feeling? You might even be able to understand your desires better because you're being really mindful about the process that you are using. Effective communication is something I go on and on about. And again, it's no difference when it comes to conscious kink. We want to encourage at all times to have open dialogue. We want to be talking about not just our desires and fantasies. We want to be talking about our boundaries. We want to be talking about our limits. We also want to be talking about our fears. Um, we want to be communicating about our intentions, as I mentioned before. Intentions really are going to be impacting how the scene goes. And that's what I mean by taking this holistic approach to be able to understand what our intentions are and how they're going to influence our interaction on the day or in the scene or in the session or whatever engagement we're about to participate in. Understanding that your life outside of that time and space is going to be influencing what's happening inside that time and space. Sometimes it's great to use BDSM and kink as a switch off from life, but I think we need to realize that we're always going to have a level of what's happening outside impacting what's happening inside. So communication should not just be occurring during the pre-scene negotiation. I think a lot of people will hopefully understand that you don't just go into a scene. We need a pre-scene negotiation where we're talking about the boundaries, the limits, what activities are about to take place, getting that enthusiastic consent, talking about intentions, talking about what safety measures are in place. But we also need to be talking and communicating during a scene. And in conscious kink, again, this is even more important because we're not always sure where our emotional and psychological states are going to go during a scene. We might have an idea, but one day you might be triggered by something that's maybe never triggered you before and you don't even know why. So it's so important to adjust for those, real time happenings, what's happening right now, not just, we've communicated about this part of the scene and now I must stick to that feeling. No, if it changes, adjust. This really will create an environment of honesty and transparency. And in time, that's going to really deepen your connection. That's really going to make sure that everyone feels valued, that everyone feels that they can be themselves. Another thing that conscious kink really understands is that there's a very deep emotional landscape that accompanies, kink and BDSM practices. And so it means that we must take responsibility for our own emotions and recognize and explore our own emotional triggers, vulnerabilities, and reactions. It means we understand when we must disclose certain information to our play partners if we know this to be the ethical thing to do. And I really believe that by not disclosing information to a partner in a scene, well, prior to the scene ideally, that you're about to, participate in, is actually taking away an aspect of consent for them because they don't really know what they're consenting to. And so when we think about a scene, because not everyone knows, I know disclosure sometimes is a bit of a difficult concept for people to understand, but if you're about to enter a scene and you have some psychological or emotional trigger, attached, or maybe some history associated with the activity or with the type of scene that you're going to do, it is the responsibility of yourself to tell that, to disclose that to the person or persons that you're going to be participating in. It could be that you had, maybe a lot of physical discipline growing up, as in you might have been hit a lot as a child or something like that, and you're going to be going into a corporal punishment scene. Look, it might be something you've completely worked through, but you know that in the past maybe it has been a trigger, so that might be something you want to disclose with your partner, for example. These precautions and awareness, they just allow us to navigate any intense feelings that might surface during a scene so that the partner is not going to maybe be shocked or, conversely, they might think they've done something wrong if they're not aware of the history to a trigger or something like that. That being said, we don't always know why and what is triggered within us. There's a lot of things stored in our bodies that we don't actually need to know what it is. But this is where we come back to mindfulness and being okay to stop, check in with ourselves, let our partner or partners know, look, something's just not landed right with me and I need a bit of a break, or I need to end the scene early, or whatever it is. And, it allows us to provide support to ourselves and also to the person or persons that we've engaged in a scene with. Safety is another non negotiable aspect of conscious kink. Again, I would like to think that safety measures are something that is in place for all kink and BDSM activities. Unfortunately, we know that's not always the case. Same thing with consent. But it's not just about discussing the usual safety measures, such as, safe words and physical limits and emotional boundaries before you engage in a scene or before you engage in doing activities, but also making sure that everyone is psychologically safe. As we know, with the approach to conscious kink or BDSM, we realize it is not just a physical practice, we realize it's also emotional and psychological as well, even if not more, to be honest. And so this means going through with everyone, as we talked about, understanding the intention, making sure that everyone knows what they're consenting to, talking about the outside influences that we might be bringing into the room that day, understanding what feelings and emotions are surfacing, or maybe that we're actively exploring in this scene, making sure that we have adequate aftercare. Aftercare is a critical component of conscious kink. We want to make sure that we're attending to each other's not only post scene physical markings or things that might come up, but also the emotional and psychological ones as well. We want to make sure that we're creating a really safe space for everyone to participate in. As I always say, any monkey can throw a flogger around and think that they're kinky. But conscious kink looks at it as more fulfilling and enriching experience by being able to prioritize the emotional and psychological needs of all involved. It looks at the intention of play, not just for the sake of ticking a box, like, oh yeah, we've talked about intention, tick, tick, but to really understand on a deeper level why you're engaging in this kink or BDSM scene or activities. By doing this, we're fostering trust, we're engaging in open communication, we're having mutual respect for each other, and, we can explore our desires in a safe and supportive environment, which is ultimately going to lead to not only better scenes and a better time, but also deeper connections with not just ourselves, but with others, and a more profound understanding of ourselves and what we are doing when we're engaging in BDSM and kink. So I hope everyone gets a bit of a better understanding of what we mean when we're saying conscious kink, and hopefully people incorporate those aspects into their playtime. So as always, stay kinky.